Good morning and good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are, mostly in Taiwan and in France. My name is Hanh Nguyen, and I am a Ph.D. candidate at the Institute of Social Research and Cultural Studies in National Chiao Tung University in Taiwan. And I'm also an editorial board member of the student-led publishing platform called Conflict, Justice, and Decolonization. You may have heard of it as the CJD project. And today I am your host. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the International Center for Cultural Studies, especially the director of the center, Professor Joyce C.H. Liu, for supporting us in organizing this important event and the events preceding this one, such as the screening of short documentaries by Palestinian filmmakers and the symposium on the question of Palestine-Israel back in January this year. I would also like to sincerely thank Eyal Sivan for generously accepting our invitation to screen your wonderful award-winning documentary, Izkor, Slaves of Memory, and for willing to stay and talk to us and discuss with us the film, as well as other matters related to the Palestine-Israel problem. Now, I will pass the floor over to Professor Joyce Liu to say a few words. After that, I will introduce Eyal Sivan in a bit more detail. And then Eyal will also tell us a few things before about the film before we start screening it. And after the screening, we will have a talk by Eyal, followed by an open floor Q&A session. And if you have any questions, please notify me. If you wish to do it beforehand, you can notify me at Hanh Nguyen. And if you have any technical questions or issues you would like help with, please notify Karen Liu. You can see on the screen the tech support of our event today. Thanks, Karen, and everybody. And now, Professor Liu, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Before everything starts, we start the screening and also Eyal's introduction. I would like to say maybe just 2 words. Okay. First of all, this event is a student-initiated and student-organized event. As Hanh said, this is already the 3rd forum that we organized since the beginning of this year in support of Palestinian people and also our Palestinian friends on campus and in Taiwan. This event is not just Palestinian people opposes Israeli people, but the global people against the militarized occupation, the colonial occupation of the place, and also U.S. or the West imperial support or militarized support for the war. So what we have been looking at is this genocide, this apartheid that's been there for decades, and also this colonial rule that's being taken for granted by the international allies. So we actually think their debate or discussion today in whatever form worldwide and at different local sites is to demand the end of the colonial occupation of Gaza, of the Palestinian place, and to end this militarization, apartheid treatment of Palestinian people, and also to rethink globally and also locally how to return a place and environment of justice for Palestinian people. I believe most people here have noticed what's been going on in US and also globally. Okay, I would just share a few links. One is just made yesterday by Al Jazeera. The other is this military arrest of students in Berlin University, and also hunger strike for Gaza in Princeton University. But of course, we heard what's happening in Columbia University, Harvard University, Oxford University, and elsewhere. So it is a shame for these university administrators or scholars, teachers, not to respond to this blazing, horrendous war that's taking place in. So the second thing I want to say, we oppose war, okay, in whatever form, in whatever location. Just like a century ago, what Freud said to Einstein, why war? He said 1933. I think this is still worth thinking. One is that everyone has the right to his own life. We oppose war because war puts an end to human life that are full of hope. It brings individual men into humiliating situation. It compels them against their will to murder other people. And it destroys precious material objects which have been produced by labors of humanity. That's what's happening in Gaza. Our student's family, his neighborhood were destroyed, mother killed, and friends, young people killed. So, so we know what's happening. Okay, more than 30,000 people killed, mostly not only soldiers, but women, children, old men. The hospital destroyed, university destroyed, shelter place destroyed, and more than 190 million Palestinian people, 1.9 million Palestinian people being evacuated. Not to mention this current action on Rafah. 300,000 being evacuated. So why do the situation happen in front of our eye in this supposedly more civilized world in the 21st century? Again, 1915, just the second year of the First World War, Freud, a Jewish Austrian thinker, of course, a psychoanalyst scholar, said thoughts for the time on war and death after the death of his son. He said not only the war is more bloody and destructive, with perfect weapons and a technique of attack and defense, it is also as cruel, as embittered. It disregards all the restrictions known as international law. It ignores the prerogative of wounded and medical service, the distinction between civil and military sections, and also the claim of private property. It tramples in blind fury on all that comes in its way, as though there were no future and no peace among men after it is over. It cuts all the common bonds between the contending people, turned against the other with hate and loathing. And also, Freud said all this is supported by the state, even though the state restricted and forbid people's lawless behavior. Freud said the state exacts the utmost degree of obedience and sacrifice from its citizens. At the same time, it treats them like children by excess of secrecy and censorship upon news and expressions of opinions. It absolves itself from the guarantees and treaties by which it was bound to other states and confess shamelessly to its own rapacity and lust for power. So today, I believe, with Eyal's documentary 30 years ago, it's the same story, right? Slavery of memories. We need to think how come people were brought by the state or civilization or education and turn themselves into a war machine to serve the state. So I'll end here, stop here. I think this is a very good moment for us for Hanh to introduce Eyal, okay, and his documentary. Okay, turn back to you.
Thank you, Professor. Now, let me briefly introduce Eyal Sivan for everybody. Eyal is a filmmaker based in Paris. He is Jewish, Israeli, born in 1964 in Haifa, Israel, and grew up in Jerusalem. He has produced many films that are internationally acclaimed and also highly controversial. He is also a theoretician and an author who has published and lectured about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, documentary filmmaking and ethics, political crimes and representation, political use of memory, genocide and representation, and other subjects. In Eyal's oeuvre, he juxtaposes Israel's regime of memory, which is the memory of being quote-unquote victims and heroes, with Israel's erasure or choice to forget of the reality that Israel is also, and I quote, perpetrators and cowards, unquote. For many decades, Eyal Sivan has been a critical voice against the state of Israel's criminal conduct against Palestinians and a supportive voice for the Palestinian struggle. In fact, his first film was shot in refugee camps in Palestine. But as a filmmaker, Eyal also questions who the camera should point to, and in effect, whose story should be investigated in cinema. If the subjects in his first film were Palestinians, in his second film, which is the film we are watching today, Eyal turns the cinema not to the victims, but to the perpetrators, or perpetrators to be, as an investigation and an interrogation. And before the film starts, it is my pleasure to invite Eyal to say a few words. Eyal, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very honored. Thank you, Professor Liu, for this unbanal presentation of today's meeting and screening. I'm saying unbanal because not many people today in the academia in responsibility position are ready to take a clear voice as you did, and I'm sure that it's a strong encouragement for the students on one hand, and also for the oppressed people which are listening to you. So from my deep of my heart, I really want to thank you for this introduction. Well, it's an occasion also, and it's not just polite to thank somebody which I admire very much his work, which is Professor Alain Brossat, that made this possible, and of course to Hanh and Nguyen for your wonderful organization. Let me introduce in few words just Izkor, Slaves of Memory, and I would say first that this old baby, which is now 34 years old, which is this film that was done in the beginning of the 90s, I would rather prefer that it won't be relevant anymore, that it will be an old document. But unfortunately, and I'm saying it sincerely, unfortunately, it's an ongoing situation where what was shown and shot 33 years ago, it's still highly relevant and maybe more relevant even for the time that it was done. In fact, the context of the film, which you will see follows 5 weeks, which is a real time 5 weeks that exist within the Israeli Jewish society. It's around the month of April and May, starting with Eastern Passover, which is a traditional Jewish religious event or holiday that was nationalized by the state and ends in the day of the independence, the day that we're talking today. I mean, 13th of May is the day of the commemoration of soldiers and hostile operations dead in the state of Israel. And the film is, in fact, was shot around this period. This film, which can be considered as an essay, political essay, came to reality because of a question that I've been asked for many years, and I think that people and whatever is the age are still asking themselves, which is how it's possible, in fact, that people that in their history, in their collective memory, suffer so much can inflict suffering to others. And this question was raised in the 90s. We are in the period of the first Palestinian uprising, the Intifada, the first Intifada, were over on the media, international media, and at the time we didn't have social media, so it was mainly TV. We have seen Israeli young soldiers, 18 to 25 years old, obeying to a criminal order by the Minister of Defense of the time in Israel, which was Yitzhak Rabin. They obeyed to his order to break the bones of the arms and legs of Palestinian youth. And we've seen those horror images on TV. And I remember that people came to me and said, what the Israeli have in their mind to be able to do so. And this is where I want to thank you for the wonderful title that you choose for this event. Really, congratulations. So yes, this film tries to be a radiography into what became the structure of the Israeli mind through a process of instrumentalization of memory. And I think that as such, it is relevant both, of course, to the ongoing horror in Gaza and in the occupied territories, but it goes further beyond the local question, which is never actually local, which is this local or glocal, if you want, global and local conflict, which is the Zionist/Israeli-Palestinian, what is called conflict. And I liked very much, Professor Yu, the reminder that we are talking about a colonial campaign, and a colonial campaign is never a conflict between two, right? Already the notion of conflict is problematic. When there is a colonial, there is oppressed and there is resistance. Well, I will let you to see the film. I will be here to give a short talk and to answer to all your questions with great pleasure. And again, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Eyal, for the great introduction to the film, and also to not just the film, but also the topic matter we will discuss today. And now we will screen the film, and the film will run for about 1.5 hours. And after that, we'll have the much anticipated discussion, talk first, and then discussion with Eyal Sivan. Carol, can you please run the film? Karen, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We've had our 5 minutes break. Can we all come back now to continue with our event and to invite Eyal Sivan to deliver his speech? Eyal, are you here?
I'm with you.
Okay, excellent. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you for watching. I won't be long in order to leave the space for questions that I hope that this film raises. But I would like, in a way, to give a kind of general background about some of the ideas that led to the film. First of all, I think that it's important to insist on the notion of memory, which is one of the streams that goes over the film and also as part of the title, which is the idea of slaves of memory. And in fact, I think that it's important to remember that the actual definition of the notion of memory is the preservation in the brain of impression, which continues to influence behavior in form of habits. And in fact, as the question is the question of the process of preservation. Would it be this process of preservation on an individual level or an induced preservation, which is an induced memory, which what we call collective memory? But we have to remember that the word memory is used in the Western world, basically with the idea of collective memory. Memory is raised as a political question in regard of Second World War and the genocide that occurred during the war, and in the last years concerning colonialism. But in fact, basically the perception, the general perception is that, an idea is that memory opposes oblivion, which I think that it's something that can be questioned. Is really memory opposed to oblivion, or oblivions, forgetting, is part of what we call memory, and it's a necessary element within the process of memorization, which is maybe memory is kind of I would say a dynamic between preservation and erasure of impermanence. So in fact, to remember is not opposite to forget. And the two opponent in words would be to erase or to whip up and to conserve. The process of remembrance is an interaction between memory and forgetting. And memory is always a selection. Goethe, the German author, says, when I hear the word memory, I ask myself, what was forgotten, in fact? The other element, which is maybe important, is that collective memory, and this is the process that we see within the film, divide between us and them, okay, and also divide between victims and heroes, which is, this is us, victims and heroes, and them, that are criminal, oppressors, followers, bystanders, and the us is built around the idea of what do we remember and what we celebrate as ideas of memory. I would like to emphasize, and this what I tried, that it's maybe the political use of memory, which is memory, is not at all, I would say, vaccine from future crimes. I would like to suggest that in the Israeli case and in many other cases, in fact, memory becomes a regime of justification of oppression. which is, this is what I will recall the political use of memory, which is in fact to induce the idea, if we take an example from the Israeli society, that being a victim in a certain moment of the past is an heritage, of innocency, which is attached to the idea of a victim. And this innocence, it's the self-image of being innocent, which interprets any act of violence and state violence as an act of self-defense, which is the impossibility to see yourself as an oppressor because of this build link to the idea of victim as an absolute innocent figure. Hannah Arendt, the German Jewish political thinker, emphasized the idea that the Jewish criminal, rape, is innocent facing the gas chamber, but is innocent only facing the gas chamber, which is there is no inheritance, or there is no whitewashing of the figure of the victim outside the context of its victimhood. And in this regard, the idea that the Israelis build and diffuse around the world, which they are victim, in fact, it's the permission, the creation of violence, and even to go to the vengeance, ultimate historical vengeance, which is a genocide. I will use, in fact, the idea of memory of the cultural thinker, scholar Tzvetan Todorov, the Bulgarian, who says this is an abuse of memory. It's the way that memory is abused. Which is the memory which allows us to use the past in view of the present, to use endured injustice to fight injustice today, which is, this is a different way of memory. There is one memory, which is the memory that will be this linear memory, in a way, I'm a victim, i.e., I cannot be a perpetrator, or the other is the more it will be, I'm a victim, I have a memory of a victim, which is I'm closer to the other victim. And in this regard, I consider that I am able potentially to commit a crime. And in this regard, I am against any kind of injustice. And in this, and this is that the question of the Israeli perpetratorships of crime, expoliation, colonial crime, and ethnic cleansing with genocidal campaign is in fact induced by a regime of justification who will be always the past. So I would like to conclude to say that I do not believe in self-representation of trauma as any collective social political sense. It's important for the traumatized individuals themselves. It is true that monster war criminals committed by ordinary men, just ordinary citizens, should not imply that by all being potential criminals, we are all guilty. Confusion, the potential of guilt, with a real one, is to disqualify the possibility of justice. And in this regard, there is they, those who commit the crime, and there is us. the question which is raised in the end of the film, which is the self-suicide that is introduced by Leibovich by explaining that Israel is walking to its destruction, is doubly worrying, because Israel goes to its destruction, but cannot self-destroy itself without destroying all its neighbors. And this is the terrible potential that has Israel by having a nuclear bomb and a nuclear program, which is called the Samson option, which means the ultimate biblical suicide as a collective suicide. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eyal. And it's very thought-provoking, what you've just said. And I'm sure that there are a lot of comments and questions from the audience, from the participants. So anyone who has any comment or question, please either text us or just unmute yourself and just speak up. Okay, while waiting for others to raise their comment and question, I would like to make a comment and also a question about your film as well as your speech. So in your talk, you said, and I paraphrase, I don't remember exactly your words, that a victim is like an innocent figure, a good figure that cannot commit crimes, cannot be a criminal. And Israel exploits the memory of victimhood as a vaccine that immunes itself from responsibility and justify its crimes. And so do you, you are also a scholar and filmmaker of genocide and not just Israel-Palestine relations. So I was wondering whether, would you say that this exploitation of memory as justification of crimes is unique to Israel, or have you observed it elsewhere in another context? That's one question. Yes.
Thank you for the question. No, I don't think that that the instrumentalization of memory is unique to Israel. I don't think neither that the exploitation of memory in order to justify crime is unique to Israel. It's a dynamic, in fact. It's a political dynamic that we can observe in many cases. I would say the idea of victimhood is maybe the most used regime of justification for national collective crimes. If I'm thinking about the idea that any act of violence, state violence, is justified by the idea of the right to defend itself or the self-defense, it's already putting the state in a position of victim. But we can go to history. I mean, it's a way that nations remember themselves. They remember themselves collectively as victims or as heroes, but never remember collective themselves as oppressors or criminals. It is true, for example, for the Kurdish nation that is associated with the idea of permanent victimhood, but we don't remember collectively that as the Kurds that committed the genocide against the Armenian for the Ottoman / Turkish authorities. the Serbs in former Yugoslavia commit ethnic cleansing in the name of the memory of the Turkish occupation, i.e., the Islam occupation, and the idea of the fact that there were doubly, the Serb I'm speaking, doubly victims of the Ottomans and of the German fascists, etc., etc. I mean, I think that we can give many examples in this case. But the case of Israel is exemplary in the sense that there is a collective international idea of Israel as an untouchable victim, and this is by the repetitive sentence, which is Israel has the right to defend itself, but we never hear the Palestinians have the right to defend themselves or to resist to Israel's defense, which is in fact very violent for them.
Yes, and they do, the Palestinians, they do have the right to defend themselves against Israel according to international law.
The Palestinians as occupied people, as oppressed under a colonial regime, according to international law or United Nations chart, they don't have just the right to defend themselves, they have the right to resist the occupation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, with any means. And I think, thank you, Eyal, for your excellent response. And I think there is someone, actually two people in the audience who would like to say a few words. I would like to call to Carl Yuan Liu. Would you like to say a few words?
Hi, thank you.
Hello, please.
I'm very much interested in the actual solution for the Israel and Jews problem. To that end, actually, I think the memory or history, when we look at the history or when we build history, we should also consider the reasons for the suffering. So that's one important, okay? And it's also actually more important for Israel to find a solution to live peacefully with the neighbors. Of course, the foundation for finding a peaceful solution is to have the basic ability to defend yourself. So I think at this point of time, Israel has proven to the neighbors that nobody can destroy them. And to me, it seems the Arabs do not seem to want to fight anymore. I may be wrong, but it seems to me that way. So I'm not saying you have the right or you don't have the right, but I think to find a practical solution, really should find a way to live peacefully with the neighbors, and to inflict more suffering to the neighbors probably would not help in that end. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Oh, my name is Carl Yuan Liu. I currently living in Taiwan. I have retired for decades, and I don't know what to say. I just don't do anything anymore other than watching the YouTube and Facebook and stuff.
Okay, thank you. Eyal, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your remark and question. I think that you used a few times in your question. You used the notion of solution. I think that maybe there is no agreement on the problem, and this is before coming into a solution. I mean, if we're talking about the problem as a colonial problem, which is not the question of to defend yourself if the Israel is not, but first of all, to come back to the roots of this conflict, which is this colonial presence, even if it doesn't see itself as colonial, but it acts in a colonial way. So it is, in fact, it is colonialism. So the problem is, or the solution would be, what is the process of decolonization, which doesn't mean about how to live in peace with the neighbors, but how to live, first of all, in peace, not with the neighbors, but in those that you co-live with, which is the indigenous people, the autochthon people, the Palestinians of Palestine, which is the question of decolonization means that there is a possibility of equality. This is what means decolonization, which means to think that there is no hierarchy of masters and slaves, of white and non-white, of Westerns and non-Westerns, of moderns and archaic. This is the first element, which is not the case of the acceptance of Israel. This is not the Zionist project. The Zionist project is not a project of equality. The Zionist project is rooted in the idea that it's impossible to live together. This is so. The other point is to come and to say all what seems solution to the problem, because the problem is defined by how it's impossible to live together. This is the way that the problem is defined. So all the solutions from 1930s until today is about how to separate, how to create this idea which is called the solution of the two state. But maybe we have to think that the process of separation is a process of dehumanization also. And to order to humanize back one in the eyes of the other, it is to remind impermanently that Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arab have only two solutions, either to live together, either to die together. There is no a third option.
Okay, I see your point. To die together might be inevitable, but neither side sees it that way. So that's another problem. So what I think is, what I hope is, people be more practical, given the current situation, and see if there's any way for the Palestinians to live even without total equality. Well, that's the basic. All right. Now, if Israel does not allow that, what you said is probably right.
What I'm trying to say is that it's not sure that there is the same perception of the notion of peace for the two sides. I think that for the Palestinians, it's obvious the notion of peace, which means to live peacefully is with no destruction of home, with no any more confiscation of land, with no any more arbitrary political imprisonment, to stop to be killed and to have access, real access to justice, and accountability. I mean, this is what peace is in the mind of Palestinians, the possibility to circulate, which means it's not about a kind of an ideal, but it's very basic. For the Israelis, and this is true until the 6th of October, before the events of 7th of October, for the Israelis for many years, the situation was a peaceful situation. Israelis lived in peace.
Yes.
With more and more relation with the Arab and Muslim world through international agreements, with an economy that didn't stop to raise, with export and privilege contract and privilege associations around the world, which means with a freedom of circulation, with very, very few violent acts influencing the society. So for the Israelis, it's very complicated to convince them to renounce on some privilege in order to get peace, because they believe that they can get peace without renouncing on privilege, which means on the basic idea of security and military security. But you're saying the Arab have to understand that there is no way to win against Israel. Well, I think that this is something that shifted in the 7th of October, because 7 months later, the big Israeli army, weaponized by the biggest power of the world, is unable to fight an organization, militarizes it, which is a non-state military group.
Okay, thank you. Now I see that there are lots of questions flowing into the chat box, so let us move on to the next comments and questions. There is one question from Yuxi. Would you like to just read your question, or would you like me to read it for you?
I can. Would you
Okay,
like me to
Yuxi,
say
please.
it? Okay.
Yes, of course.
Hi.
Please.
Thank you so much for all your sharing. I'm Issy, and you can call me Celeste or so. So basically, my question is, when someone's identity is attacked, for example, someone attacks a particular trait of mine, I'll be more sensitive and aware of it. So in this case, given that there are a lot of protests and animosity towards Israel, especially increasing recently, how much do you foresee nationalism to increase in Israel?
Well,
Yeah, that's
thank you very much for your question. I think that it's interesting. It's interesting to think about your question, because this is one of the arguments which is, in fact, external attack raises nationalism and it's counterproductive. But if we look at the process that Israeli society went through in the last 40 years, since the first Palestinian uprising in the 80s and today, I mean from the end of the 80s, which was in fact from the beginning of what is called the peace process that started in Madrid in 1992 and followed after by Oslo, the peace process, international peace process by Oslo until today. So if we look about this 30 years, you will see that nationalism in Israel raised, not because of external pressure, because of the feeling of absolute power, which means exactly from the idea, which is there is a disconnection between the self-representation as victim and the reality, which is the most weaponized country in the Middle East and one of the most weaponized countries in the entire world. And despite that, the sense of nationalism is stronger. Colonization became stronger. It's maybe the impunity which is what allows the nationalism to become what it is in the Israeli case.
Thank you. And Jonathan, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, I can ask it. Can you hear me?
Sure, yes, very clearly.
So thanks very much for making the film and for being here. And I had a couple questions, but one of the things that stood out at me were some of the comments that students made in the film about military service. And I just sort of was wondering more speculatively how you think Israel would be different today if there weren't a mandatory military service. And I don't mean like from a military success perspective, I just mean socially and culturally. And the thing that made me ask this question was there was the one student who was saying like, after high school, we have to go to the military and it's just our duty and they give us the orders and that we just don't question that. And I also remember, I think maybe you were in conversation with one of the teachers and kind of disagreeing, and you brought up serving in the occupied territories, and that really seemed to like rub her in a really bad way. So I don't know, something about military service and just sort of the feeling perhaps of not having a choice in the matter and having to conform. I'm just curious what you think, how you think that has affected Israeli society and what might be different if that fact of Israeli society were also different.
Thank you, Jonathan. You're pointing out maybe the core of the way that the Israeli society functions. In fact, Israeli society, if we think the notion of Israeli society is Israeli military society. The military is the melting pot, in fact. The military service, as you see in the film, is taken as a continuity of the system of primary and secondary school as education. This is not a question of choice, like, to go to primary school is not a question of choice. This is the way that the Israelis are seeing and in being introduced into the army. The army ends the process of education. In fact, it ends the process of melting the Israeli into Israeliness in a certain way. So the if of the question, could we imagine an Israeli society without this army or with no compulsive military service? Well, we can imagine it in another condition, which the military and the civilian are not absolutely entangled one with the others, which is the settlements, for example. The settlements, are they military outposts or they are civilian outposts? In fact, there are civilian outposts that can exist just because there is massive security military that defend us, which is to speak about it as civilian is already to take out of it the military. The same thing in the question of Israeli economics. I mean, Israeli economics, let's not forget that the first Israeli export domain is the high tech. The Israeli high tech is completely entangled with the military. I mean, out of 2 units of the Israeli army, mainly one, which is 8,200, most of Israeli high tech senior employees, senior direction are coming out of this military unit, which means the Israeli military, the Israeli high-tech success is because Israel, all this technology is coming out of the army, that the state invests into the army. The army is not just a fighting power. The army is also the question of development of Israeli health, emergency health. The military is the question of Israeli fighting international law by the system of military justice and military lawyers, etc., which are working on the transformation of international humanitarian and war law. The Israeli military is a way that, for example, youth in Israel know the country, travel through the country, visiting places, visiting monuments, visiting battle spaces, visiting archaeological sites. The Israeli military is not just a compulsory service. The Israeli military is a part of the bone and flesh of Israel society. It's not a society that has an army. It's an army that has a society in a certain way. It's not one against the other, or it's not a question of possibility of being compulsory or not.
And if you allow me just a quick follow-up, what do you think the effect is on children in school and their way of thinking, knowing that at the end of high school they have to go and serve in the military?
It's being transformed into something which is not at all question, but it is put forward as what can be the advantages. I can take a personal of today very present example, which is my nephew. He says to his mother, he said, "I know that you and my uncle don't want me to go to the army. But there are also good things in the army." You know, this is what he is saying. And in fact, for the Israeli kid, when he thinks about the army and he wants to be a singer, he said, well, it's good to go through the Israel to the military bands. This is a guarantee of career. Most of Israeli singers are coming out of the military band. I mean, a lot of Israeli journalists are coming from the military radio, which is one of the most progressives in terms of music, programs, etc. It's a training field also for journalists. It's true for the cinema unit of the army. I mean, I could start to kind of say it's very, but think about a kid, think about a boy, male, etc. You're 15, 16 years old, plenty of testosterone, and you say to yourself, one day I can fly a F-16, I can be a pilot. I mean, it's the Israeli army gives the possibility to go out of the joystick and the video game at home and to make it in real. I mean, you can play with a joystick and to throw, to bomb with drones over real spaces. So if we think of kids, well, it's also about phantasm.
Excellent. That's fascinating and also very scary at the same time. And this discussion has been so fascinating that I keep forgetting to ask our audience to please briefly introduce yourself before you ask your questions, because I think it's also interesting to know where people come from and what their background is. And also on Jonathan, I will let you introduce yourself briefly in like half a minute. But on this discussion specifically that we've been having, I have a comment to make here. I think it's relevant because I observed that the enrollment of the youths from high school to the army is, for me, it looks like a graduation ceremony almost, because it's the last day or one of the last days of high school. And so it's like, and at this graduation ceremony, the graduates pledge their loyalty to the state of Israel and swear to obey their commanders no matter what, and even to die for the nation if necessary. So it seems like the goal of Israeli education is to raise children to be soldiers and to be nationalists. And I think this is also a point that is made in the film by not only by Eyal, but also by the scholar in the film, the Leibowitz. Yeah. And yes, Jonathan, please.
Oh, okay. Just really quick. My name is Jonathan. Originally, I'm from the US, but I live in Taiwan, and yeah, I'm a software engineer, basically. So yeah, that's all I need to know to understand my question. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. And we have more questions here. I think the next one is from I go by Heatwave. Heatwave, would you like to ask your question? Or would you like me to read it for you? Okay, perhaps I'll just read Heatwave's question. My understanding of the Bible, Jewish don't admit Jesus as their Messiah, sorry. The one the Lord had promised them in the Old Testament. So I have been wondering if they are still waiting for their Messiah, or maybe some of them, not all of them. It's just when I saw what Israel did to Palestinians, I wondered how they could justify themselves. Maybe it all has nothing to do with the Bible. It's just politics, but I'm still curious. Thank you. And this is a question by Heatwave.
Well, I think that we should clarify that what you've just seen in the film was shot within the non-religious schools, the secular, if you want, the general Israeli education system. So, in fact, as you've seen, there is no kind of the Bible teaching inside the film, not because the Bible is not taught in the secular schools, the non-religious schools in Israel, is because I am not considering as part of the factor of militarization. Of course, the Bible have an important meaning in the idea that this is kind of the real estate document on which Zionism is based off, even as secular, even in non-believing in God. We can define the Zionist left as saying we don't believe in God, but God promised us the land, right? This is a kind of an internal paradox of left progressive Zionism or secular Zionism. So, of course, the Bible plays a role in the justification, historical and archaeological, if you want, justification. But it's not the question of the Messiah, which is a question, which is a religious question. Within Jewish religion, there is one of the ideas is that the Messiah will come. But it's a permanent future. The Messiah will come in the future, which is what is important. It's not the arrival of the Messiah, but it's to work permanently towards the arrival of the Messiah. And this understanding of to work permanently towards the arrival of the Messiah is both as the religious, which they believe the work of God to pray, to accomplish the commanders, etc. But among secular Jews, even Marxists, that had this idea of messianic, it's not about a figure that will come and to save the world, or an era that will save the world. It's about the work towards the arrival of the Messiah, which is what is important is about working in the present to create better condition for the arrival of the Messiah, which is, if you want, maybe a metaphorical idea. But within Judaism, there is also a messianic vision, which is not of a permanent future, but that it will come. And it will come in a condition of a terrible war, a catastrophe. And among this tendency of Judaism, it's being shared also with fundamentalist, evangelistic Christians, which are also Zionists and support today. This is the big support to Zionism. It doesn't come only from Jewish milieus. It comes mainly today from evangelic Christians in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and of course in North America, which believe that it will be the big Armageddon, the big war between good and evil, between the light and the night, that this will create the big explosion. The potential one of the arrival of the Messiah. And the condition, and the Christian condition for that, is that all the Jews will group together in the promised land. It will create this big war, total war. But then the Messiah will come and will be recognized. So in a way, we can say, and some scholars say there is Zionism is a kind of Protestant thinking inside Judaism. So it's not the question of the Bible. It's not the question of the Messiah itself. It's a question if we're talking about a process of reparation, of trying to do better, or it's about this big total catastrophe, which both among Jewish milieus and Christian milieus believe that this is the Messianic way. I hope that I answered your question.
Since Heatwave doesn't have a mic, so let's just move on to the next question by Stephen Chan. Would you like to ask your question, Stephen? And please introduce yourself briefly.
Right. Okay. I hope it works. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
Right. I'm not sure why. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. This is Stephen Chen. I'm an academic working at a university in Hong Kong. And my question is, I think, quite simple. As I type in the chat, the movie includes at least one young man who seems to disagree with what he has been taught. He says he doesn't like to fight. He said some land should be given to the Arabs, Palestinians, so that they can stop the fighting and so on. I'm just wondering, like, how prevalent is this kind of view? And since the movie was made like 30 years ago, what's happening with this young man who seemed to disagree with his teachers?
I see that I see that you have two other questions, which in fact are following this question, right? Another question, which you asked me how prevalent this view among Jewish people, and then you added that maybe I mean that Jewish people and Israeli people are not the same, right?
No, that's not my question. I think it was Jonathan's question.
Because I see that, this is Jonathan's question. Right. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I do know that there is a difference between the Jewish people and the citizens of Israel. I know that they are not exactly the same.
So, in fact, the young man in the film, which is kind of a figure that the spectator can understand that I identify with, he's bearing a little bit my story also. As we can see also with his family, when they're watching TV, that he has a position of an outsider a little, as if he was. And when I asked him, where do you want to be a film? He said, outside, which means that there are some outsiders inside, of course. There is always in a society a tiny minority of opponents, of people which are refusing to go with the stream, which resist to it. It's not very prevalent among Israelis because it means to put yourself outside of society. In a way, you have to be in a certain position already of outside of society in order to accept that. So there are not many, of course, but you're asking how prevalent this is among the Jewish people. Well, among Israelis, Jews, and I'm making a clear distinction between Jewish people, or Jews, if you want, and the Jewish Israeli community, which is one among the forms of Jewish living. It has a centrality for many, but it's not the same. It's not the same. The Israeli Jews is a nationalistic way of being Jews. You can ask among Zionists. Well, Zionists are the majority. But among Jews, the idea of not taking weapons for a state, being outside of conflict, well, you still have religious Jewish communities that believe that they should be outside of the idea of war. And they don't do any military service, nowhere. But there are others which are also Jews, which are not religious, that mean that the wars that should be done as a Jew is wars of emancipation, to join the struggle of emancipation, for example, which this is also a Jewish position. Decolonial to join Black Lives Matter, to fight injustice, oppression. This is also to be seen as a way to think Judaism. This is not the case in Israel, of course, among those kind of Jews.
Okay, and here we see, yes, Stephen?
No.
You asked me about this boy. Well, this boy, he's an artist, an actor, very engaged in climate issues. So he continued to be himself, which is not easy. It's heroic.
Glad to hear that. And we see in the comment section, would you like to make your comment?
Oh, no, it's all right. I was just replying to Jonathan. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
May
So
I
yes, of course.
also, yeah,
Go ahead.
just one curiosity. I think you deliberately juxtapose the teacher's position against Leibowitz opinion. Okay. I'm curious about the way Leibowitz put. Okay. He stated clearly that the path that this education is doing is to lead from humanity to nationalism to bestiality. Okay. And he also remarked that they are perverted on the path. Okay. So this is also what you mentioned, this impunity and also this traumatic narrative, claim of this national trauma, provide them this guilt-free conscience for whatever they are doing or have done to the Palestinian communities in the occupied zone. Okay, and they claim this is their domestic affairs. All this apartheid and restriction of movement, and there's entirely lack of infrastructure, education, water, clean water, and so on. So actually, we don't know whether either ceasefire or whatever will happen, total destruction, any hope for the Palestinian people. Well, we are very much concerned because it seems that the international law or United Nations, they are entirely impotent in intervening this affair. Not to mention US, Biden said they will support Israel because of their financial Wall Street support back there. So they also arrest students in their protest encampment. But my question is, Leibowitz also said, perhaps we could divert from this memory, this path, maybe adopt the Jewish perspective. Is there any space, I mean the public space, in education, in university, in media, okay, or in general public sphere. Is there any possibility for this diversion or reconstructing? I remember 30 years ago, there was, as you said, the peace project by both sides. But in recent 2 decades, there's no sign, no traces, no space at all. The space even is also limited in other countries because of the Israeli influence. So what do you think?
Thank you so much for this question. Well, I think that you're pointing out, in fact, a question which is larger. In what the conflict over there concerns us? Well, I think that the conflict over there concerns us as being a paradigm on one hand, and also because we see that there is a function of a lab of governance, which is a new way of considering, which is what it means a criminal state, for example, a state that do not obey to any kind of international law, but in the same time, it's criminal and legitimate.
Or Judeo-Nazism, as Leibowitz would say, right?
Yeah,
that's practicing.
It's in on one hand, it's criminal and it's legitimate, and
yes,
I think
yes,
and this is the question of the gap. It shows also on the Israeli around what happens now. We see the growing gap that we knew that exists, but not such a between those who govern and the people. I mean, even university responsibles and students. We see that the students understand that it's not about if the White House will change its policy or if its United Nations will vote. It's about a step to take now, which is now I'm in this university, I am showing my support to Palestine, but I'm asking also my university to divest
yes,
from the complicity.
yes,
Which is to understand that the levels of complicity are tremendous. It's not just the complicity of big powers, a complicity of local organizations like Columbia University.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So it means that it's not waiting anymore that we'll be taking a big decision. It's understanding that by taking also local decisions, there is a possibility to move forward. So, and this is true also for the question of the freedom of speech, because the freedom of speech, it's not the question just the freedom of speech over there, because freedom of speech is challenged here. And when I'm saying here, I'm saying globally, in Asia, in Europe.
Yes, yes, in Taiwan too. Yeah.
It's challenged on the base of so-called support to terrorism or so-called racism against Jews, anti-Semitism, which is what are the mechanics, what are the dynamics of jeopardizing, oppressing, and annihilating the right of expression outside Palestine, Israel, on the name of protection. So it concerns. So the fight on Palestine today, on rights, is not just a fight for the Palestinians. It's about fighting for preserving the space of expression, not just the freedom of expression, because if you have freedom of expression and you don't have a space, it means that you don't have a freedom of expression. It's about defending the space. And this is what's important within the universities. I think that we are not waiting now the American shift, or we're waiting the international shift. We understood that in the case of Israel is from down up. It won't be from up down, because Israel is used as a laboratory And it should be also, and this I'm saying it in a very intentional purpose, the idea of friends and enemy also is being blurred, because those who consider to be the friends of Israel are the ones that are supporting Israel in its suicidal and genocidal campaign. So to be a friend of Israel, I think that other countries that have big friends should understand what it means to have a big friend that doesn't tell you, stop, you're getting crazy, but tells you, go as you want. This is not a friend.
Maybe Alain has something to say.
Alan?
Yes. Yes. Are you hearing me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. I would like to ask two brief questions, one to Eyal and one to Hanh. To Eyal, do you think that you would be in a condition to shoot that film today in Israel? I'm asking you this because I saw recently an Israeli film which is called the Knee of Abed, Abed's Knee, by Nadav Lapid, where he talks about, which is about the conditions in which Israeli filmmakers, let's say, have problems today with the authority. They have to sign awkward documents concerning the issues of their films. So I have doubts about on how freely or to what extent you could freely shoot that kind of film today. So that would be the question addressed to Eyal. And I would like to ask Hanh very simply, does the film, what the film is about, does it remind you of your socialist education in Vietnam? Has it something in common or not?
Yeah, please go first.
Yes, definitely no. Definitely no, this film could not be done today, but from several reasons. First of all, the series of laws and conditions that are put by the Israeli grants today are partially a result, I would say, of successes of film like Izkor, which is to restrict the possibility is a way you do it by restricting the access to places. It's not possible to film in schools because of Izkor, Slaves of Memory. I mean, this film made that the authorities do not allow to film in schools in very exceptional situations, which means that it's funny because it means that by definition they understood that they have something to hide, right? Well, in the time. So it's not, but also I must say that it's also a different relation to the media that we have today. There is a huge suspicion. I mean, today people see themselves, especially Israelis, they are seeing themselves through their representation on the screen. And there are things that they won't say, or they won't speak to everybody. But this is true also around the world today with the possibilities to use the camera as was used 20, 30, and 40 years ago, because people were more candid about the result, which they are not anymore today. So there is this double thing, which is the political environment, but also the media environment itself, which is very challenging. What there is I think that it's the articulation in the end, which is important. It's to form this process inside the film. And today we can do it out of other methods because, for example, the Israeli soldiers now in Gaza, during very long time, they were filming themselves. They were filming themselves with selfies and on TikTok. and cursing and calling for extermination and showing destruction, etc. So we can build today out of the open sources media, we can build our other articulation, which are important, which are also kind of important, even if we have this impossibility to do this today in Israel, especially, but in other countries, and in Israel, not just because of the laws, but also because of the conscience of the people.
Yes. They call it screen documentary. You can take whatever it's available online. Yes.
Okay, and for my simple question, whether watching this film reminds me of the socialist education in Vietnam, is that your question, Alan?
Yes, yes.
Well, yes and no. I mean, in Vietnam, Vietnam is a communist regime with a communist party as the ruling party. So, of course, there is a certain level of, educating and even indoctrinating to the young people how to align themselves with socialism and with or accepting the legitimacy of the party. But I think at the same time, it's not the same because the level in the film that I see, the level of it seems to me it's not quite extreme in Vietnam. It's not as militant. My impression of the film is that the the teaching and the education, the indoctrinating and the it's like just grinding like memory. You have to remember this. And anytime you will hear Izkor, remember this, remember that. It's quite extreme to me compared to the case of Vietnam. And when people are walking on the streets or doing whatever, they will stop when they hear the siren in commemoration of a certain past event or certain heroes. In Vietnam, there is a place and a time for this kind of commemoration. There is a lot of commemoration for deaths of the war, for example, past events and heroes. But in Israel, it seems that it's more socialized, like it's more diffused into the civil society. Like when you are with your family, when you're with your friends, doing whatever daily activity you're doing, but you are reminded of this memory, collective memory, and that you are part of this, and that it's more. I imagine that it's more effective in educating the people that this is a part of the history. It is a part of your own identity, your own person that you cannot forget. But in Vietnam, it seems like we don't ever do this when we are with family or with friends. We have to go to a place, an organization, like in a class, for example, and if you work for a public school, for example, then you have ceremonies and rituals, but not as extreme as this, it seems.
Thank you.
I hope I answered your question.
You did.
But Elaine, you should know that there are many parallels in Taiwan. Okay,
Yes,
the education through this martial law period. The film they show, the anthem they play at school every day, the ritual and everything. But within this recent 30 years, it's identity shift. So there's another story, different modes. But anyway, I'll stop here.
Okay, and if I may, I would like to ask this very short brief question to Eyal as the last question. I think it has been fantastic, a very productive session of discussion. I would just like to make a comment that this film has been made, or was made like more than 30 years ago, and in the last 30 years, I can observe that maybe many things have still remained the same, such as the compulsory military service and the education, pretty much similar. But do you observe any things that have any new things that have influenced the awareness of young Israelis today as compared to 30 years ago? Anything hopeful? Is there, so that, like anything that would rein in and then maybe well, not rein in, but you know, like for example, social media. Do you see any hope in that? In like how that helps raising awareness of young Israelis today, or any hope?
Well, until a certain moment of your question, I had the answer, and then I kind of wondered about my answer. I mean, all what we see persists in the Israeli system. It was accentuated by introduction of more religion, more Jewish religion into the secular school on one hand, and much more days around the year of commemoration and of so and so. In this regard, there was a deterioration, if you want, of the Israeli education system that became more shallow and more nationalistic. And this is what we see also in relation of the result, because we see, in fact, the soldiers that are fighting today in Gaza, or are operating more than fighting in Gaza, they are all result of the education system. But you asked if I see hope. Well, I think that there is hope on one hand, which is the more, I would say, great disobedience. There is more people that mainly in the center of the country, from middle class, upper families, that refuse to do the military service. So this is but still it's a kind of a minority. No, it's not on the social media. It's not, as I said, I do not actually believe that it from inside Israel can be the change. The Israelis, the young Israelis that want to change after the military service, they are leaving the country today. That they feel that they are unable to act inside in terms of internal change, and this is true for many countries in the Middle East, but also now in Israel. But what I see maybe a backlash, which is that more pressure, more understanding that the argument that all what we see around as opposition to Israel is just racist, anti-Semitic. That to understand that the Israelis will see that they are losing actually the comfort that they had around the world. This might make some young Israelis to change, which means really, and this is why the external pressure on one end and the interest in the minorities, inside the Israelis minorities that are trying to fight, if it's inside or outside, I think that this is the hope in a certain.
Thank you. And I think maybe partly because of the pressure they are facing, Israel as a nation is facing from outside, the protests, the pressure, the divestment and sanctions, hopefully that will work as well. If not any soon, then in the long term.
Well, the first reaction is, of course, this is against us. This is anti-Semitic. This is being paid by international Islam, and etc. This is the first reaction. But as I say, I think that it's about understanding that the price of this colonialism is higher than its benefits for the Israelis. To understand that Israel is on the everyday life, they're losing something. They're losing. It's less comfortable to be an Israeli young scholar in a university today in the state. It's less comfortable. Well, this pressure might bring Israelis to reconsider.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think with this remark, I think we can conclude our event today. I think it has been very successful, and I'm very grateful to Eyal Sivan. Thank you very much. Your talking points have been very fascinating, and I learned a lot today. And of course, thank you, Alan and Carol, for suggesting this idea to me to invite Eyal and of course for introducing us. Otherwise, I don't think I would have made it. And Joyce as well for your always support. And I think Joyce would like to. Would you like to say a few words?
No, that's enough.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah.
Thank you everybody
Thank
for
you.
joining
Thank
and for
you, Eyal.
staying with us
Thank you,
until the
Alan.
very end. And have a nice day to Alan, Eyal, Carol in France, Leo as well. And have a nice evening, everybody in Taiwan.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Yeah.